This is the second part to my Premier League review. I'm going to give you my Premier League predictions that I made in August, my reaction to them, and then also a mini season review of all the teams in the Premier League. Now, like I said, this is a second part video. In the first part, I did the bottom half teams. Then I realised the video was 20 minutes long, which is quite long, so I've now done two separate videos. One for the teams who finished in the bottom half, another video for the teams who finished in the top half. So let's jump straight into it. Starting off with Wolves, I thought they'd finish 15th because I thought the impact of losing Nuno was a lot. I'd never heard of Bruno Lage, so I was very much quite sceptical of that appointment. And in the summer, they didn't do a lot of summer transfer business. In the end, I think it's been a mixed season, but one that's not ended very well. First of all, Bruno Lage, I think, has done a really decent job. Wolves started so well in the Premier League. And after a very, very, very poor start initially, in 21 games, they won 40 points, which is Champions League form, and only 3 teams earned more points in that time. But then in the final 14 games, they had 9 defeats and only 11 points, which is really poor, and that's relegation form. And because in the manner of which it's ended, I would be a little bit concerned if I was a Wolves fan. Now, I've seen a lot of Wolves fans, not a lot, that's unfair. I've seen some Wolves fans comment on the ownership and question it. I think that's a little bit extreme, just because of where Wolves have come from 4 years ago, or even 5 years ago, sorry. Middling championship club, not doing a lot. Owners come in, they bring in Nuno, instantly promoted to the championship, they win the league, back-to-back 7th place finishes, and then a mid-table finish. They've done an excellent job. Nuno's cycle was never going to last for 7-8 years, and when it did end, Bruno Lage, that transition to the new manager wasn't so extreme, and actually Wolves played quite a lot of good football, like I mentioned earlier in terms of the stats and the amount of points they won. But the manner of which they've finished the season is very concerning, and I think there's going to be a lot of changes in the summer. Romain Saiss is almost certainly leaving. Neves, given the way he reacted to the Wolves fans at Anfield on the last day, it seemed like he's going to leave as well. I think Jimenez, you got to question whether he's still up for it in Premier League football. Don't get me wrong, his injury was so traumatic and horrific, and a lot of players would have been forced to retire. So the fact he's even still been able to play for Wolves and score a few goals here and there is astonishing. But you can't deny that going forward, Wolves have been quite poor. Also, Jose Sarr has been fantastic, arguably one of the best goalkeepers in the Premier League this season. But how many times is he going to be able to bail Wolves out? Also, Wolves' recruitment is really erratic. For every Jose Sarr and Ruben Neves, you have Fabio Silva and Semedo, who combined cost £70 million, which is pretty poor. So for Wolves, I think if anything, unfortunately for them, they could finish lower than 10th. Maybe not a relegation battle, but they got a lot of work to do over the summer to convince myself that they can finish higher than 10th. In 9th, we had Brighton. Incredible, incredible season. A-star for them. Given how big they are as a club, the players that they have, the style of football they play, it's phenomenal where they've come from. Their owner, Tony Bloom, is very, very intelligent. His recruitment around the football club's been excellent. Graham Potter has been fantastic. They play a really great style of football. And, you know, it's vindicative of how good Brighton have been, because every time a Premier League manager's sacked, everyone goes, Potter? Potter? His name always seems to be mentioned in terms of next manager candidates. So Graham Potter's done an amazing job. It's the most points they've ever gained in 51, and it's the most wins with 12. They've also developed some amazing young players in Basuma, Cucurella, even Mopai up front. He could score more goals, but he's still a relatively decent Premier League striker. Then you have really strong, good Premier League players in Trossard, Webster, Sanchez in goal is fantastic. And whenever they lose players, it doesn't seem to affect them at all. I mean, look at Burn, leaving halfway through the season. They managed to get £13 million out of Newcastle, which I think is a pretty decent fee. And they haven't looked like they've missed him at all. So Brighton, they deserve so much respect. Fair play to them. Can they push on even higher than 9th next season? Then we have Leicester. Now, I predicted them to finish 5th, which I think is quite ambitious and not my finest prediction in the world. They ended up finishing 8th. And I think it's a really weird season for Leicester. If you're an optimistic Leicester fan, you'd say, we finished 8th, top half of the table. We won the Community Shield. We got very far in a European competition. And we, at times, have looked really good. James Maddison, Keenan Drewsbury Hall's been really good. What's the issue? But if you're a pessimistic fan, or maybe a sceptic, you'd say, well, at times we've played some really bad football. It's fair to say. We've had a ton of injuries, to be fair, and maybe not dealt with them as well as we could have done. We crashed out the FA Cup, losing embarrassingly against Nottingham Forest. So there's just a massive, massive lack of consistency for Leicester. I think for me, I'd probably go somewhere in the middle. Winning the Community Shield and finishing in the top half is still great for Leicester, but I think it would be hard to compare them to the club they were 10 years ago. They're no more Little Leicester. They have a phenomenal training ground, brilliant players. Brendan Rodgers is a very decent coach. Their expectations should perhaps be a little bit higher. The manner of which they lost to Forest in the FA Cup was really, really bad, and the lack of consistency is frustrating. I did say earlier they have had a lot of injuries, and that is fair to say. Maybe they need a bigger squad, who knows. But going into the summer, for me, it's kind of in the balance as to whether they finish higher or lower. I'm really not sure on Leicester. West Ham, I thought they'd finish 10th, but in the end, they finished 7th. A phenomenal, phenomenal season from them. David Moyes deserves so much respect, given how big the squad is. The fact that Antonio is their main striker. They have Fabianski in goal, who's very, very old. Brilliant, brilliant season from them. To get so far in the Europa League as well, they deserve a lot of credit. Beating the likes of Sevilla, Lyon, playing really well against Frankfurt, but just coming up short. They've had a fantastic season. And for the majority of the season, they were competing in the top 4. It's just right at the end that they fell short. I mean, how many teams who have a European campaign struggle significantly in the Premier League? That hasn't happened with West Ham. So for me, David Moyes deserves so much respect. He definitely should be in the running for manager of the season. Fair play to West Ham. Man United. It's just an F. F's in the chat, boys. I thought they'd finish 4th, just because I thought they definitely won't finish higher than 2nd or 2nd like last season. So maybe just a little bit lower in 4th, but they've been shambolic. Ole Gunnar Solskjaer was sacked and probably the right choice. And in hindsight, Ralf Rangnick was a really bad idea and a bad appointment. Now, I thought he'd do quite well because I thought he was a relatively intelligent footballing brain. He would do enough to motivate the players. But it turns out his style of football just didn't suit Man United at all. And then actually, as a manager, he doesn't have that much pedigree. He's only won a couple of trophies in his career. So maybe in hindsight, appointing him as temporary manager wasn't a very good idea. So I'm not really sure what the Austria national team are thinking about. Maybe in one-off games, Ralf Rangnick might be better, but I don't know why Austria appointed him as new manager. So Man United, they've had a terrible season. Arsenal, I thought they'd finish 6th, yes, below Leicester, but in the end, they finished 5th. Now, I think at the start of the season, Arsenal fans maybe wouldn't have taken 5th, but they wouldn't have been so disappointed. But it's the manner of which they finished 5th. The fact that for a long time they were 4th and it was in their hands, but then for Spurs to pick them right at the end in the North London derby, really, really, really bad for Arsenal. I don't know how they're going to recover next season to try and finish in the top 4. The only thing I'll say for them is that they've got a very, very young team. It might take a couple of seasons for them to gel. Having said that, the young players they have look really, really, really promising at times. So I think maybe for Arsenal, in a few seasons' time, it might come good. Will Arteta be given that time? I don't know. A stat that also shows their naivety is that they've only won once from a losing position, which is quite poor. So for Arsenal, big opportunity missed to reach in the top 4. I think if Arteta's given the time, Arsenal can eventually finish 4th and then build from there because they have a really good young team. However, missing out on Champions League football is very, very damaging for them. Tottenham, on the other hand, I thought they'd finish 7th below Arsenal and Leicester, but they managed to get top 4. It started really badly, and Nuno always seemed like a temporary appointment. He seemed like their 7th or 8th choice, so he was swiftly sacked, and that's no discredit to Nuno. He's a fantastic manager, and he did such a great job at Wolves. It's just the difference between Wolves and Spurs. It is a big step forward. Anyway, Antonio Conte was appointed, and you must say he's got a real tune out of the players. What's really helped for Tottenham, though, is the fact they strengthened in January with Bentancur and Kuvalevski, and the fact that Arsenal didn't. For me, that was the big key for Tottenham. And in the end, both those players contributed massively for Spurs, especially Kuvalevski, and they finished in the top 4. I think it will mean that Antonio Conte will probably stay. I think he would have stayed anyway, just because the Premier League is the best league in the world right now with the best coaches. But the fact they've got top 4 as well is a big, big boost for Spurs. Then, with the top 3, I got all these predictions spot on, actually. I said Chelsea would finish 3rd, and they started really well. They could have had a cup double as well, but it's a case of if, only if, losing against Liverpool on penalties in both the League Cup final and the FA Cup final. So that was disappointing from them. And then the manner of which they got out in the Champions League against Real Madrid at the Bernabeu would have been so disappointing because they played so well in Spain. They just couldn't get over the line. And for me, they've been really hungover from that result. But also, I think a lot of Chelsea players and fans' attention has been off the pitch, which is completely understandable, given that Roman Abramovich has left after what seemed like basically since the turn of the decade, since the turn of the 2000s, has been owner at Chelsea. The fact that he's now gone would have given Chelsea a lot of uncertainty, but they've got new American owners now. I think it might take a few seasons for Chelsea to really build up a title push, but it's been a good season overall, but almost just a case of what if for them. Then for Liverpool, I thought they'd finish 2nd just because I thought with Man City's experience of winning the league in many of those seasons, I thought they'd just pip Liverpool, and that was the case. Although there's no denying Liverpool have had an incredible season, having a cup double and then a potentially Champions League win as well. Klopp deserves an enormous amount of respect. Then for Man City, they've now won 4 Premier League titles in 5 years. Fernandinho, of course, is now leaving Man City. He's won 12 major trophies with the club. So a brilliant, brilliant servant for the team. And yes, Man City's Champions League exit was disappointing. But I mean, they've done so well in the league. Pep deserves a lot of respect. And yes, Man City have spent a lot of money and they have a big squad. But there's one thing spending that money. It's another thing getting these players to train really well and coach them. And that's what Pep's done. So both Liverpool and Man City have had brilliant seasons. Fair play to them. I think it'll be very hard for any team to catch both these teams in the next few years. So that's my Premier League review of the teams in the top half of the table. I've already done a video of teams in the bottom half of the table, so if you could watch that video, I'd really appreciate it. If you enjoyed this video and my kind of content, please like, comment and subscribe, and I'll see you all later. Thank you.